Welcome to Transformative Principal, where you learn how to be a leader and not just a manager of a to-do list. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Your to-do list is a hungry monster that is never satisfied. For the last year and a half, I've helped principals get awards, get promoted, and find the time to do the work that really matters. I recently opened a new mastermind slot. Schedule a call with me and let's overcome the stressed and isolated principal position together. Go to the show notes for this episode at transformativeprincipal.org and click Schedule a Call with Jethro. I've had great reviews from principals who have purchased the trauma course that I have available at jethrojones.com/trauma. And it's not too late in the year to start talking about this. One principal recently got it and wanted to talk especially about self-care at this time of year. And that's a big part of dealing with trauma in your schools. So go to jethrojones.com/trauma and get that course today. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I'm excited today to talk with Michael Reichert. This is a really good conversation, and I definitely encourage you to check out the book that I mentioned in there, How to Raise a Boy. And really, everything is all about relationships, and that's what it is for boys. I mean, that's the short version of this podcast, but you're going to learn a lot about Michael's extensive knowledge about how boys learn and what makes them tick. So anyway, enjoy this conversation with Dr. Michael Reichert. And I would love for you to send me some feedback about how this podcast is going, your thoughts, your concerns, people you'd like to hear from. jethrojones@gmail.com. That's my email address. And I'd love to chat with you some more. So thanks so much for listening and enjoy this conversation. All right. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am so excited to have Dr. Michael Reichert on the program today. He's the founding director of the Center for the Study of Boys and Girls' Lives at the University of Pennsylvania and a clinical practitioner specializing in boys and men. And he has conducted research globally. And we are going to be talking about his book, How to Raise a Boy, The Power of Connection to Build Good Men. And I'm really excited about this because one of the things, well, first, welcome to the program, Michael, before we get right into it. Welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Jethro. I'm glad to be here. And I love talking about school and education stuff with professionals. So it'll be fun to talk.
Absolutely. One of the things that I have been very concerned about as it relates to men and boys is this portrayal in the media, especially of how men are quote unquote supposed to be. And I think that is really damaging to people, to both men and women, about what a man looks like and acts like. And so can you talk a little bit about what the current expectation is of what men are like? And then we can talk about some of the things you learned about how to help boys grow into strong adult men.
Yeah, not a quick subject, but I'll try to do it succinctly. So we find that while stereotypes related to girls and women have changed dramatically as a result of a 40, 50-year women's movement for equality and equity, there's been very little work to counter stereotypes about boys and men. And as a result of that, cultural norms impact boys practically from the time that they're born and dramatically shape their development. Just as a couple of examples, a friend of mine, a biology teacher at a school nearby, was carrying twins. She knew that one was a boy and one was a girl. And she said to me, "I know which one's the boy." And I said, "How do you know?" He said, "He's the one who kicks me."
Huh.
She believed, like so many people believe, that boys are really defined by biological innate traits, hormones, anatomical structures, brain differences. We no longer can say that biology is destiny when it comes to girls and women, because the recent 40, 50 years have really shown us that any idea we had that women were limited by biological or anatomical characteristics was really debunked. But we still believe that largely about boys and men. So, a psychologist at Stanford University, for her doctoral dissertation, studying with Carol Gilligan outside of Boston, embedded herself with a group of about 5, 6, 4-year-old boys and followed them for 2 years, stayed with them, observed them, interviewed their parents, interviewed their teachers. And what she found in her book, which is titled When Boys Become, quote, Boys, Judy Chu's her name, what she found was that over the course of the 2 years from age 4 to age 6, the boys changed dramatically as they absorbed the norms and began to perform masculinity the way that they felt that they needed to. So they started out at age 4 in her interviews and meetings with them, as she put it, direct, authentic, really able to be themselves, able to articulate what they wanted, who they were, what they felt. But over the course of those 2 years, they really changed. She put it, they traveled from presence, being themselves, to pretense by way of posturing. They adopted the mask of masculinity and became more inauthentic, less willing to be vulnerable, less able to articulate their feelings. This is age 4 to 6 in a school. And the question, arose, where did this really consequential conditioning come from? And it came from everywhere. It came from their teachers. It came from the other boys. It came from their parents. Another bit of research conducted by that organization in Washington, D.C. that I was telling you about, called a Man Box study, interviewed and surveyed about 1,500 men in 3 different countries, U.S., U.K., and Mexico, and essentially asked, are there core messages that you receive about being a man? And indeed that there were. Asked them to name those messages and those traditional, values like being stoic, being unemotional, being strong, being responsible. There were a set of behaviors and attitudes that belonged in a man box, and a set of behaviors, attitudes that were disallowed, that were outside of the conventional norms. And that the men who were more associated with the man box norms were men who were more depressed, more anxious, less happy, more prone to bullying and to sexual harassment, sexual assault, and more prone to suicidal thinking, 40%.
Wow.
But they asked, where did you guys get these messages? 60% said from their parents. So, you asked the question, are there norms, pressures, stereotypes that play on boys and men? And are these consequential? And the answer is, it's robust, it's alive, it's relatively unchanged, and it's terribly consequential. Now, my research has been both in families and in schools. And in schools, what I want to say, since we're talking to educators, is that schools are the second most important organization or institution in boyhood, and play a profound role in organizing the conditioning, the socialization of boys into these traditional identities.
And of course, we play a profound role in that because the boys and girls spend so much time at schools. And yet there's a lot that we do because of our system and institution that make it more challenging for those boys. Can you talk about some of those challenges that education traditionally puts up to prevent young boys from growing into good men?
Well, I think that there's a number of different ways to answer that, but the immediate one is every school is occupied by what we call a hidden curriculum. There are historic norms and values and practices and beliefs that are embedded in the life of a school community. They come from the school's traditions, the school that are built into practices and curricula. This hidden curriculum is tacit. It's often not conscious or examined. It tends to be pretty fiercely defended. And most educators, principals, school leaders feel as though they can't get their arms around it or get in charge of it. But here's the tragic thing, Jethro. Boys themselves have very little efficacy or control over that curriculum. They are obliged to fit themselves to it, the opportunity structures and rewards of school cultures. If they dare not, they're often policed by other boys in systematic bullying. They often receive subtle or not so subtle messages from the adults in the community as well. We carry these beliefs, these hidden, the norms of this hidden curriculum in our hearts into schools. And the most recent research I did was on the student-teacher relationship and the significance of that in boys' learning. And what I found was that, by and large, most of us educators, even those of us who had spent 50 years, working in schools, we didn't really know what our experience should have taught us, that boys are relational learners. We still operate in a fog that I think that is created by these stereotypes and myths.
Yeah. So can you address some of those things that we do that is part of the hidden curriculum and how that is not helpful in helping boys be relational learners? What roadblocks do we put up that we may not be aware of?
Well, there's sort of a monochromatic or a sort of a one-dimensional type of male masculinity that tends to be rewarded or recognized in school cultures. And, we adults in the community, we sort of turn a blind eye to that. We think, well, that's just the community, or those are cultural norms that are, not directly related to the work of educating our students. But the truth is that hidden curriculum is tremendously consequential for the formation of self-concept, and it's directly related to how able teachers are to fine-tune their instruction to the actual needs of the students in their classes, and how well the boys are able to imagine their possibilities within the context of those constraints. So the hidden curriculum is very consequential. The adults feel like it's not their job to fix it, and the boys feel as though they have no power or control over, resisting it or escaping it. So, maybe I could tell you a little bit about this relational learning study.
Yeah, that'd be great.
As an example. So my partner and I, between us, as I suggested, had 50 years of experience working with boys. We were commissioned to conduct a study in 36 different schools in 6 different countries, about 1,500 boys aged 12 to 18, and about 1,000 of their teachers. And we asked 2 questions in an online survey, and then we conducted follow-up focus group interviews. The 2 questions were, tell us a story about a relationship that went well. Tell us a story about a relationship that did not go well. We conducted this study. This was the second study that we conducted. The first was from 2007 to 2008, and the second was from 2010 to 2011. The first study, we had asked one simple question in 18 schools and similar numbers of participants. But we asked one question, which was, tell us a story about a learning experience that was productive, that was positive. And the teachers described lessons that worked, and they tended to describe them with the detail of a technician. I designed this lesson, to follow this theory with these particulars. And there was a lot of uniformity in what both the boys and the teachers said worked about those lessons. They tended to follow sort of certain themes. But there was one major theme that was really produced or described for us by the boys themselves, not by the teachers at all. The boys, where the teachers described the details of the lesson with great detail, the students described the particular features of their teacher with great detail, with warm, robust appreciation for teachers that had transformed them, made the difference for them, and with real strong feeling about teachers that had not done something that the boy thought he should have done, or in some way or other turned him off. What we realized was from that first study that boys are relational learners and that my research partner and I, with the 50 years between us and the 1,000 teachers that were in the trenches with the boys, neither of us really understood or recognized how relational boys were. We came to conclude that the relationship, the connection between the student and the teacher, was essentially first base. That you can't engage a boy in learning. You can't ask a boy to go to that vulnerable edge where he must admit that he doesn't know something and depend on a teacher or a coach to help him acquire new skills. A boy is unwilling to do that absent some kind of relationship with a teacher who he feels knows and cares about him.
Yeah. So what I find so fascinating about that is that every time we talk to educators about what they remember about their teachers as they've grown up, they never say any lessons. It's always about the relationship. And we know that. And yet we have such a hard time as educators building that relationship. So I want to reiterate that point that a boy cannot learn unless that relationship exists. And that is just so powerful. So next week, I'm going to start the second half of the interview with this story in one of my schools where this boy just was really struggling. And the only thing that turned him around, was a relationship. And how many times that has happened, I cannot even tell you. So look forward to the second half of the conversation with Dr. Michael Reichert next week. And thanks so much for listening to Transformative Principal.